we work with a new generation which literally like runs on GitHub Actions. So they don't know about DAGs and these things. It's really like a big generational jump of how these 20-something people are trained. In summer 21, we showed like a Streamlit demo to 100 of these Python people. 2 of them had heard about Fivetran. 1 of them used it. Our modern data stack world doesn't understand how different these choices are. I don't think we directly compete with the modern data stack in any shape and form. I think we want to be interoperable modeler with this world.
Welcome to Data Talks on the Rocks. I'm Mike Driscoll. The traditional ETL architectures that have powered analytics for years are starting to show their age. Pipelines keep breaking, APIs are always changing, and developers spend more time maintaining than actually building. A new approach is desperately needed. That's why I'm so excited about today's guest, Matthaus Krzykowski, co-founder and CEO of dltHub, the makers of DLT, one of the fastest growing open source data tools in the world. Few people have as clear a view about how data engineering is evolving. From the explosion of Python tooling to AI coding agents that can scaffold entire systems in minutes. If you want to understand what the future of ELT and ETL will look like, this is the conversation. Let's get into it. Matthaus, welcome to Data Talks on the Rocks. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
You know, I really just want to get right into DLT. You announced a couple of days ago this $8 million round. I guess my first question would be, did you know at the time you were raising that round that Tobiko Data, SQL Mesh, and DBT were going to be consolidated into Fivetran at that time?
No, I didn't know that.
Maybe if you had, you would have forced your investors to pay more of a premium for some great tech that you're building at DLT. You know, I think that, you and I were talking before the show. You've lived all over the world. You spent some time in the Bay Area. You were born in Poland. Now with your team based in Germany, Berlin. You guys have folks here in the Bay Area. You've got team members. I know one of your co-founders, I think, is in New York. Is that right?
Not yet, but we're increasingly have a US presence.
I will say that when I first heard about DLT and the company dltHub, it was from Simon Spady, who is the author of the Data Engineering Handbook. We work closely with him at Rill Data, and he was singing your praises from the beginning. I looked into it. It feels to me that you've at least got a big following that seems to have started in Europe and now sort of coming across the pond, as it were, to the US. Maybe let's just talk about how DLT started. Every great company often starts with a founder starting to attempting to solve a problem of their own. Let's talk about, what problem were you trying to solve? What was the inspiration for DLT? And I'll add a final thing. And is it a clear, some homage to DBT that you chose the term DLT? So we'll start with the origin story of this technology.
So we started around 5 years ago, and it was me and one of my former co-founders and existing CTO co-founder, Martin, were just doing demos every month something different. And in April 2020, we got early access to GPT-3 because I'm a part-time angel investor, and I was operational within an AI agents company, which is before it was cool. And we built a prompting demo 5 years ago. Showed it to the Rasa team. Martin Casado is on the board.
Yeah.
On a Friday, on Monday, they asked us where we want to build data pipelines for Fortune 500. And
was this before Martin's investment in DBT?
It was he invested in Rasa, I think, afterwards.
Okay.
2020.
So maybe you inspired him to realize there was something here.
I think he didn't need much encouragement. I was just like a minor angel investor who was operational early on. But I come still from the .NET age. I'm an old SQL guy. I know what relational database is. And suddenly, like a pattern emerged, which seemed like a boring panel on a boring conference, SQL versus Python.
Mm-hmm.
But it was happening so much. And we were suddenly seeing these Python kids who were supposed to get AI and ML done, fighting with people our age and who are the data engineers, the gatekeepers, and then this looked like something worth investigating, because the assumption was AI will happen, these fights will get bigger and bigger. Let's figure it out. I think that was like we're embedded, like we're literally forward deployed engineers for 9 months, bootstrapping early on.
So you're in some ways what I hear you saying is you're on the side of at least coming to this on the SQL side of the fence. Is this an example of if you can't beat them, join them, and say I should really take this Pythonic data community seriously? We should really look into maybe this is the path and this is the future of data engineering.
I'm not sure. Like, I mean, if you ask for the origin story, so the very first version of DLT, which got deployed in this agentic company, like a Series C now, Sequoia-backed fintech. And I think like the inflection point of let's build a Python library came like 9-12 months later. Okay. When we started to investigate like what could be a solution. So we were not ideologically driven about it. And we started to talk to people. We had a lot of Python ML people talk to us, like Julian from Hugging Face. And so we saw this ML revolution happening in Python. And then we were inspired by it. And we took the assumption that to satisfy both worlds, we need actually to build in Python.
And at that point, what was we were talking in a previous episode with Joe Rice about the modern data stack. So this is a few years ago, which must be at the sort of peak modern data stack, 2020, 2021. Some of these other tools must have existed, so that we've got other tools that are involved in data ingestion, data movement. What was out there, and at that point, how did you think that DLT was going to compete against, again, maybe deeper pocketed, better funded alternatives that were emerging?
That's a great question. So actually, I've wrote a memo back then, and I'm sometimes sharing it with people. And most things which we wrote up then are still true. And we thought that, these GUI-centric frameworks are not going to which do the whole end-to-end experience will not work for this, just like these object-oriented frameworks would neither. Right. So we took an assumption of what it could look like. And then, we start very simply with some JSON loading. And the way you can think about the history of DLT is that, we added like hundreds of powerful workflows over the last couple of years, and DLT became much more powerful. But within, I think, 6 weeks, we realized that we built for senior data engineers. Right, like we were one of the first 90 people at DACON 2 in Amsterdam, and we suddenly see this. We're actually building for the senior data engineers,
and that was the persona you realized. Okay,
that's correct.
This is the persona we're building for.
So why we're associated with Python, we were actually building for internal data platform engineering teams,
and so contrast that with what, I'll just name names, right? Fivetran is certainly a much more GUI driven platform for data movement. Let's talk a little bit about, and of course we have a dog in this hunt, and you and I were I think exchanging messages about, code first tools versus no code tools or low code tools. And again, it is interesting how the pendulum shifts. 5 years ago, a code first approach to a data tool was in some ways contrarian, because every VCs were funding these no code and low code, offerings. To sort of double click on what does code first enable, what versus no code or low code interfaces, like what are some of the things that you recognized interfacing with this Pythonic machine learning, senior data engineer community? What are some of the things that a code heavy embrace enabled?
I'll give you two answers. So I think when I talk to customers, like the way I paint the pictures is I show them a spectrum where you have the benefits of standardization and the benefits of customization. And you can take a tool like Fivetran on the standardization side, and then you can take pure code on the other side of the spectrum. and with Python, like actually when we start and if we replace anything, in 8 out of 10 cases we actually replace Python scripts which stopped working. So it's a very, very different world than the modern data stack world. There is often dbt at some point in our like traditional orchestrators, but it's a world which works with Python scripts and the modern data stack. And in the way I narrate it is usually if you have a business heavy team, if you need like standard, if standards are good for you, then you should take tools like Fivetran. And if you want the best out of the two worlds between standardization and customization, and you have Python engineers, then you should consider us.
And to obviously to make the case is that when it comes to ETL and moving data from location A to location B, the number for any of us who've worked in the actual call them the salt mines of data engineering, we know that the number, the variety of data sources out there, the long tail of data sources that you need to interface with is massive. And so, I sort of can only imagine that any time you create, GUIs for data sources, you have to focus on the standard ones, the most common ones. But that I've read that you've got over 5,000 sources that you support. That it's much easier to support those through code than to have built 5,000 modals that GUIs that folks can click on. Tell me a little bit about how you built those 5,000. Can I call them connectors?
We call them LLM scaffolds, or I'll start maybe somewhere else. So like our first VC believer was Ross Mason from MuleSoft.
Okay.
And he got acquired by Salesforce because of a tool called Data Loader. So, and he did it all in Java. So we understood the benefits of GUIs very, very deeply.
And by the way, Salesforce is still buying ETL companies. They paid billions of dollars for
That's correct. And I don't think actually that these two notions compete too much with each other. They're complementary. I think they're different worlds of engineering and different personas. Our assumption from the get-go was that the world looks much more like Hugging Face datasets, right? Like if you check it out, it's 500,000 datasets. And that was our North Star. And from the very beginning, we were talking about democratizing, going to 100,000s of these. So that's something we were planning. From the beginning, and we were very like when we talked to like investors, we were already telling them 4 years ago that we don't want to monetize pipelines, and that was very contrarian over the years. I think the first inflection point towards what you're saying was around 2.5 years ago, where we rebuilt DLT and also started building our docs for LLMs.
Like by the way, you said 2 years ago you started
2.5 years ago, yeah.
You started to rebuild DLT.
That's correct. There was a moment where we recognized that you can vibe code. The word didn't exist then. That was 2.5 years ago, and then we already been building towards this future for 2.5 years. And a lot of us come from this agentic world. There's 30 agents running around at the DLT operationally.
In the Slack community of DLT, you have an agent that responds to every single question from the community.
That's correct.
With a first pass answer.
That's correct. So, and we have 29 others running around like this. So we come from this world, we dogfood this. And then there was another, so we had we built the first version, what you called scaffolds 1.5 years ago. And it felt really like if you're we're in California here, as you're surfing and you're waiting for the wave. And the initial wave came last September, a year ago, where we saw that OpenAI indexed DLT. right? So when you use any of the models and, they wait because they look at the web, we saw that stopped. The LLMs index Python libraries, and they indexed us last September. And then there was a moment where, we had built, for example, our REST API toolkit in a specific way where we just knew something was coming. And in January, we had 2,400 custom sources built. And in May, suddenly things exploded. We have LLM analytics in-house. So in May, we had 110,000 LLM requests by OpenAI and Anthropic. Last month, it was 280,000. I would say it's in the summer, the whole agentic wave started to happen.
And when you say requests, are you kind of monitoring the requests of kind of crawling of the DLT docs and code base? Is that how you measure the request? Okay.
Yeah.
And why are they having to do these requests? Because those docs and that code base is constantly changing, so they're having to kind of re-update their knowledge. The foundation model needs to get updated with your latest.
Sure. Yeah, that's true. But I think we also hit, some of the custom requests as well. Okay. And so we see with our internal tooling, we see a lot of usage. And so we've been, this summer already building for what we consider YOLO mode. But it's an interesting case because it's, DLT, you mentioned Simon, that was these brainiacs, these super smart people were our core user base. But suddenly with LLMs, things get simple,
right?
They have a different interface, right? That's, I think, where it's going with how, Rill is code first, DLT is code first. And suddenly the LLMs make it simple and abstract all the complexity away. And so that was happening. Last month we had over 50,000 custom sources built. It's a 20x since January. And so it's a different world, how things are built. And there's literally thousands of these built. Not only, these GUI-centric businesses, they make most of their money with 30, 40 sources.
Right.
And our hope was, can we democratize that? And can we make data engineering as a industry much bigger? If we succeed, then companies like Rill and their users benefit because, we make the pie much, much bigger than people thought. So that was we are very, very mission driven.
Right. I'm going to ask a little bit about commercialization strategies in a second, but and to sort of pick up on your point around a different way of coding, I think there's an interview with the Cursor CEO, maybe just yesterday on social media, talking about, a new way of coding, right? And I think traditionally we've all thought of coding as, typing out code. And for a long time, of course, Stack Overflow is kind of cut and paste code. And we've all seen that graph of Stack Overflow traffic just dropping like a stone. And, now we have this new modality, which is you're not directly writing code. You're prompting the generation of code, which it sounds like, certainly creates a much greater number of people who can use something like DLT, because not everyone needs to know the innards of Python. You've got to know some Python to be, I think, somewhat effective, but it certainly lowers the skill bar dramatically for folks that want to write a pipeline. I want to ask a little bit about architecture. So, I've written, ELT code myself. I start out as a Perl hacker. It shows my age to be writing, Perl scripts back for genomics pipelines years ago. And then clearly saw the advantages of Python as just a cleaner way to kind of write these scripts. One might argue well, if it's all code, why do we even need DLT? Why can't Cursor, Windsurf, and others just generate a bespoke Python code that's going to, scrape my Stripe transaction logs or my Salesforce, customer base? What is it about the architecture of DLT? What's that makes it a valuable kind of intermediary or kind of layer in between just otherwise a pure Python script that, grabs data from point A and moves it to point B?
Yeah, right. I think what DLT originally was in the direction was one of my co-founders, Adrian, he was a consultant and in the space, a data engineer. And literally in these early days when we were bootstrapping and we moved from Kubernetes to Python, was the idea, let's automate admin in Python. And right, so adding things like incremental-loading, normalization, nesting, authentication, pagination, things which people like you have to write again and again. Whenever you write,
we just had a pagination issue this morning where we were not correctly paginating. We connected to a ClickHouse cluster with 10,000 tables, and we had not correctly paginated beyond 1,000.
And going back to the origin story, so our assumption was, let's make these Python scripters do these things without them knowing that they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, because the destination was a SQL database where these schemas exist.
Right.
And so if that's in this form, then these smart people from the data engineering age will accept what these Python scripters are doing.
Right.
So while people associated us maybe with Python, actually what we are, we have a Pythonic interface, but, we have great helpers for Airflow, for all the orchestrators, for dbt, and so we see ourselves as in the middle of both worlds, and it's just the interface is Pythonic.
Right. I think when I was talking to Joe Rice in the last episode, we're asking why the data community is so friendly, and one thesis is that generally we feel like we're misunderstood. When I think about data engineers in particular, which in some ways, I think are probably the most important members of the data community ecosystem, because we're kind of the ones in the, in this sort of boiler room, if you will. I think very few business people understand just how complex data pipelines are, and take it for granted that, data just moves from point A to point B. But and when I think about sort of building a pipeline, it's not just getting the data moving, from point A to point B once. It's all of that other, all of the other things that you need to have a pipeline that is always on. And I think the analogy to plumbing feels correct.
100%.
Plumbing is really important. It's not just moving water from point A to point B. It's having the water flow, being able to check the pressure, all of the things that, we've done. Tell me a little bit about how DLT enables all of those other pieces, like incremental loading and idempotency, and thinking about watermarks, and, providing some observability, like all of the things that those of us before DLT and I guess modern tooling existed, we kind of had to do that by hand. Maybe talk about some of those pieces that live inside of the DLT architecture.
Right, if you come to our docs, then you see actually very simple, very readable, and I think clean Python code. If you know what a Python list or a Python dictionary is, what a source and a resource in Python is, then you're ready to go. And it was like an assumption that if you want to use DLT, you should not be needing any training. It should feel natural. Another principle was we need to allow people to bring any tooling they want. And if they want to use Airflow or Dexter, it was clear for us there's many tools which we don't want to replace in any way. We want to be interoperable modular. And that's been, I think, a big part of our success, because we've been driving the business of a lot of these people. And that's, important to us. If you see now we do orchestrator education. Education is great for us. What it created is whenever there's tools out there which solve a lot of those things you just described we don't solve everything, but we're part of the ecosystem. Whenever there's a new DuckDB thing, or somebody does a demo of DLT, when somebody builds and people talk about it, right? It's something we built for. We took our spots where we felt, okay, this is needed. This is what's missing. But we didn't, go greenfield and ask people to replace their tooling. We wanted to work with other people's tooling. That's why we're, for example, so successful with an enterprise. Because
because you're saying we're going to work with your existing, we're going to maybe enhance, but you don't have to sort of do a mass migration of every piece of your stack to use DLT. We can integrate within.
That's correct. I think people are, when they talk to us, how many of these 5,000s are enterprise organizations? We have from Snowflake, we have financial services badge, manufacturing badge, health badge, right? Like we're used in production by really, really large organizations because we become part of their infra, and we're seen as an accelerator of tooling they actually already chose.
So in my experience with data pipelines, there's a quote from a famous author that says, everybody wants to build and nobody wants to maintain. When in the world of data, you can never set foot into the same river twice, right? You can never step foot into the same data schema twice. Data schemas are always changing. Stripe's API changes. Salesforce, frankly, sources and destinations are these moving targets. And how does DLT handle not just the creation of the initial, scaffold, but the maintenance of these scaffolds?
Sure. So we have like 30, 40 verified pipelines which we handle, and the community wanted us to increase the number.
What are some examples of those? So if you're going to say the top 5 pipelines that you handle, what would those be?
Okay. Actually, like the most, so on the REST API, things like actually our Python listen dictionary are number 1 and 2. Which the people in the modern data stack even don't see. So we do. There's a lot of popular things which are not that common.
We are the Python listen dictionary.
People send like Python listen dictionaries into databases. Then we're not only great with the most common verified sources, but like where people need a lot of customization. So it can be even something like a CRM like Salesforce. I don't believe like there's one connector for Salesforce, there's actually hundreds.
Right.
And so whenever, again, my initial image, whenever there's a load of customization needs, that's where we win. We're also great with databases. So for tools like Rill, giving like these analysts access to unstructured data, which suddenly is structured, is like great for us as well. So that's like 2 areas of product market fit. And then we built this generic REST API toolkit, and that's been fabulous for us.
Okay, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about, you said that when we talked to investors, we told them we don't want to make money on data pipelines. And we, again, the community has been talking a lot about how with this, I'll call it coalescence, to use a term, a database term, the coalescence of DBT and SQL Mesh and Fivetran. One thing that people often complain about is that it's a blessing for Fivetran. It's a curse for their users that they really charge in the old-fashioned model of like per row of data that's moved from source to destination. You've decided not to embrace that model. What is the commercial model for dltHub? How do you charge today, and how do you envision charging in the future? Now that you've taken some venture capital, how do you tell your investors, hey, we have a plan to make money, but in an honest way, perhaps?
It's, by the way, the same answer I already gave 4 years ago. So here, pretty much nothing changed. So when we took the seed funding from Foundation Capital, my assumption at the time was, and I'll give you like an indirect answer because I'll paint you also like a picture of how we think about the market. So my assumption very quickly was that the company which makes most money with where I am is actually Palantir.
Yes, I was gonna ask you about those forward deployed engineers at Palantir. Are they using DLT?
So I hired XML people to be my forward deployed engineers, and I put them with large customers or mid-sized customers, and then we're building with them and for them, and we picked up support checks.
By the way, it's such an amazing marketing term that Palantir has called these forward deployed engineers, because the other term that I would use for some of these folks, which may not convince them to take the job is data sanitation engineers is the other.
It's
they're the sewage workers. They go into the enterprises and they actually have to do piping on absolutely horrendously architected pipelines that are barely functional, right? And they're in those boiler rooms fixing them.
Yeah, but I think what emerged very quickly is like for us a picture of not only about DLT, but people ask us to help them to do all kinds of things, like how do I give access to Pythonic pipelines, like this declarative way how to get people interact. Like multiple people came up with that. When people ask us also to help them, can you help us manage transformations? When there were so many things, and we then, after doing this for 9 months, we took a picture. Okay, what do we need to build, like in our own flavor of it, and this is what we've been building ever since. And so where we're going is DLT is open source, it extracts and load, it does this very well. It increases the market much more. And the user is actually this Pythonic person who now, since a year, is using LLMs and AI code editors. So it's a new person, right? These people,
the AI enabled or the AI native data engineer.
So it's a new person, a tool for a new person and who does things.
Right.
And now our commercial product needs to be shaped in such a way that it adds on top of it. And what we're going with it is, as we said, is we're going into transformations, into data quality, into runtime and storage. And that was something we already nothing changed here in our direction the last 4 years.
So the T in DLT stands is data loader tool, but you're saying maybe we can make the T transformation.
So we have enterprises who already run on our T. But like what this does is like you've loaded
and what is that T? You mean just
I'll explain this just right now. So you've loaded data with DLT, and now you maybe would, after loading it, you want to manipulate it, you want to enrich the data, clean that data, and the interface is Pythonic. It's very simple, but the code underneath can be both Python and SQL. So it could be IBIS data frames, but it could be also SQL glots or DBT.
Mm-hmm.
So the interface is Pythonic, but the tooling, we don't replace any of these standards, but we give our users like these powerful engineers like Simon now the ability to do end-to-end data pipelining.
They can declare, so in some ways the kind of the master controller
That's correct.
of this pipeline is their kind of DLT
That's
project.
correct. Right.
And it's got hooks into, just the way like PyTorch has hooks into
100%.
Obviously much deeper, CUDA code that's running in C. You're providing kind of a Pythonic interface
That's
to
correct.
All of these data.
So our assumption was like not only in this generation with the modern data stack how it built, but how things were in Java with ROS, that EL and T are siloed.
Mm-hmm.
And like you have this shift left movement. Can we completely destroy the borders between EL and T?
And compress, kind of
compress. And put the engineer in charge. So we empower any software engineer. The idea is where we're trying to go is make it simplify the whole data engineering and make it much more like software engineering. Where the other thing which again, this young generation doesn't want to do, a lot of the runtime is too complicated. So we will be coming up with a great runtime product, which we actually already started to show yesterday here at Small Data SF, and then also storage. So this is where we're going.
Right. Let's so it's certainly a great positioning to say we're kind of friend to all, enemy to none. We're the open source tool that is going to work and be friendly with these other tools. But at the same time, it certainly feels like a vacuum. We talked at the beginning about how you took this new funding, not knowing that. I know there's always a gap between when startups take money and when they announce it. So this was the good week to announce this new round of $8 million. But in that time, the world shifted. And so there's certainly a void that's been left. I don't think some of us could have predicted that Fivetran and DBT might join forces, but it was very surprising that Fivetran bought Tobacco SQL Mesh, who are the arch enemies of DBT, and then came along and bought DBT. Great chess moves by the founder of Fivetran to do that.
I'm sure Martin Casado is involved here.
Of course, yes, absolutely, right. There's always investors are kind of behind the scenes. But that being said, it does open up the opportunity for DLT to move into let's talk transformation for a second. How, if you were going to build your own transformation engine, is SQL Mesh an orphan right now? Is that something that, you would consider using as a transformation engine and maybe rescuing it? It's not clear that Fivetran has really the desire to have two transformation, open source transformation tools internally. Would you consider having kind of a DLT blessed transformation engine, and what would that look like?
I think our approach to this is that we talk to all these people,
right?
And we've been also talking the last couple of weeks, and our intention is to support DBT Fusion.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right.
By the way, what do you like about DBT Fusion versus other? Just out of to support it, but to embrace it, or to say it's an equal among many.
The principle will be like what you see with us with what we do with orchestrators, right? We support all the orchestrators, we promote them, we train
Dagster,
people, everyone, right? What we find that a lot of our user base, Simon knows obviously he's got his preferences, but we work with a new generation which literally runs on GitHub Actions. And so they don't know about DAGs and these things. It's really like a big generational jump of how these 20-something people are trained. One big eureka moment, inflection moment, which I didn't notice, in summer 21, even before the library existed, we showed like a Streamlit demo to 100 of these Python people. 2 of them had heard about Fivetran. 1 of them used it. It's such I don't think our modern data stack world doesn't understand how different these choices are.
Right.
So the way I would paint it is essentially like I don't think we directly compete with the modern data stack in any shape and form. I think we want to be interoperable modeler with this world. And I root for Fivetran and DBT's success. It's my third VC-backed startup. I'm an angel investor. I root for them.
Right.
The people there's a second bucket, then there's the ML people. People know about OpenAI, Anthropic. We're an OpenAI startup program company. We have the same now investor as Anthropic. People know about MCP, but people don't understand all the internal tooling built by the applied AI teams, which is so different on first principles. And then you have the Python crowd, which no one knows. We talked about Palantir, but what about, and maybe some people know Anaconda, but what about N8N? I was until recently an angel investor in N8N, right? There's so much stuff going on there, which I look at much more than the patterns on the modern data stack world. I feel these worlds don't intersect. We feel we're in the end we may maybe compete on some of workflows with the modern data stack, but we're now what's driving is we went from 7 million Python developers in 2018. We had 22 last month. I think there'll be 100 million. I think this new user of who's in with an iCoded or talks LLM, the lingua franca is Python.
Right.
And they will be interacting with a modern data stack this way. And so we think, if anything, we are a net positive for everyone in the modern data stack because we're enabling them to interact with these tooling and interact maybe with new artifacts and new pieces.
So we've talked about your Catholic approach to integrating with all these different components, and in some ways maybe the fact that you've been an angel investor for a long time is good because it's forced you to keep your loyalties open, that you kind of think about the universe in a way that maybe others don't. Let's talk about packaging and executing Python code. One of the things that I've always hated about the Python ecosystem, and I know I'm not alone, is that, once a year or once every couple of years, I have to blow out my entire Python local environment. We've seen the rise of things like UV of late. We certainly, there's new companies like Modal that are making it, certainly very Python forward. How do users of DLT today, what's the expectation for how DLT is kind of packaged up and run, and how do you handle, I guess, this, I would say, Achilles heel of Python, which maybe is getting healed, of packaging and running, Python scripts.
So we embraced UV, and I think in general, like I would agree with a lot of the sentiments of Python versus SQL, right? Like I come actually from the SQL side, and in many ways the Python data engineer work is way less mature than the SQL relational database one, right? But I don't think
at least in Python there's one dialect of Python that everyone uses. The problem with SQL is that there is no standard. Every dialect, right? This is why SQL Glot exists.
Yeah. And what I'm trying to say is like our loyalty was to understand these new users and make them connect with traditional data infra. And right, we interoperability modularity is key for us. And right now, I think as we grow bigger, right, Wes McKinney joined the table with IBIS, right? Like we contribute a lot of IBIS back. Travis Oliphant joined the round. We have a lot of I think increased responsibility to make this Pythonic experience great. And we're building a Python first, code first, much simpler data infrastructure for this new generation, but also not only these people, but also for these senior data engineers.
Talking about storage, you mentioned storage is one of the ways that you see DLT and dltHub, commercializing or offering value. Again, not charging, probably charging for storage. What are you seeing in the data ecosystem right now when it comes to storage? Again, harkening back to the conversation with Joe Rice in an earlier episode, where data lakes are all the rage. We've got Duck Lake is certainly now a sort of DuckDB backed competitor or alternative to Iceberg that Hannes and Mark would claim as better, simpler, more intelligently architected. Iceberg continues to be widely adopted. Snowflake, despite the fact they didn't buy Databricks, they didn't buy Tabular, they still are, embracing Iceberg quite a bit. What are you observing, maybe with the perspective that's more Pythonic or Python oriented? What are you observing in the ecosystem with regard to that storage layer that folks are, using? We've got to have state somewhere.
So I'll first tell you like our user behavior in the community. So we support all these technologies which you mentioned in Python first. There was a moment around August last year ago where suddenly not relational databases became the most popular destinations in our community by file systems. And I didn't know what this means. I spent months investigating it. I was very skeptical of Iceberg at the time. Steve Vassallo, my seed investor, was investor in Tabular. We had built Tabular Pythonic support 2 years ago.
And was not why it was
and it's Iceberg is still Java first, right? A lot of these things
totally
is so.
The PyIceberg library was not that mature. I don't know today.
It's correct.
How mature
it's still if you see the PyIceberg download numbers, at the beginning of the year, they exploded. So you saw people shifting, moving, and we took some bets. We're a launch partner for both Snowflake and Databricks for Iceberg catalogs. We have a Duck Lake, right? Like DLT works in such a way that when you move it from DuckDB into cloud storage, it's the same code. It's like it's all our customers are shift code, and we make it flexible to which destination we build. So that's like the trend we're seeing. I'm not sure where this will go. I think like the LM stuff is much clearer for us. I think I would, much smarter database people than me would argue that there'll always be different types of databases. Data will be stored very, very differently, right? Like like Chang from LensDB invested in us. Right, you mentioned modal. We see new things happening there, new needs happening there. So we're investigating that and listening to customer needs.
The thing it seems though about data is that people always talk about data has gravity, and so unlike making a shift from a particular computational tool, say instead of using Google Cloud Functions, I'm going to go to modal. You can, instead of using Anthropic, I'm going to use OpenAI. Those changes can happen quickly, but data has gravity. And so if you're Netflix or Apple and you commit to putting, or, your Siri logs or your Netflix video watching logs into a particular format, it is extremely hard that's a one-way, that's a one-way door. It's something you do maybe once a decade, right? There are people who are still running Hadoop clusters. Probably there's a lot of data still in HDFS, right, laying around. So it's not something that I think people shift quickly. Just to come back to the observation you said is that you saw the number one destination for DLT becoming databases a few months ago.
No, it's like our most popular destination until autumn last year was Snowflake, Postgres,
right?
And suddenly it became file systems.
I see. Okay, like object stores.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
And when we started to talk to customers about it and talk to people in the industry, what we started to understand is that, again, our user base are often these Pythonic, Pandas, NumPy people in large health financial organizations, and large customers had real trouble in empowering these use cases with relational databases.
Right.
So suddenly, by allowing these new, now ever important stakeholders to interact with S3, that felt much more natural,
right,
to a lot of these large customers, these large teams. So it's a bias, it's a preference. It's definitely, like, if you had asked me last December, I would have told you that every AWS rep is recommending Iceberg, the reInvent, and it's a push from down, where both Microsoft and AWS are pushing Iceberg on everyone because they want to take away compute and storage from Snowflake and Databricks.
Right.
So that was my assumption
before.
But then when I investigated with customers, there was a real bottom-up push by these new users as well.
They prefer writing to file systems than writing to databases.
That's correct. Like they don't fundamentally, while agree that relational database, Kimball, this is the right call. It exists for a reason.
Right.
The users, and there are many of them.
Yes.
They're a little bit like barbarians at our door.
Yes.
And they're so important to this organization that these platform teams have to shift to their interests.
Right. Well, but it's also got to be a cost function in the sense that
that's correct.
I think the two arguments for which Ryan made before he was acquired by Databricks was independence, right? If you put your data in a file system or object storage, right? Whether it's S3 or Cloudflare R2 or Azure Object Storage or GCS, you're not beholden to Snowflake was pushing ELT for so long because it's great business for Snowflake that they're the the only place your data lives. Once you have it in object storage, you can choose, right? And you can be, maybe you use Databricks, maybe Snowflake, maybe DuckDB.
Our Bessemer investor, Laura, she wrote a great piece called Data 3.0, where she talks about the separation of compute and storage.
Right.
You see how many query engines now exists.
Right.
And there's certainly like a big shift and gravitation towards this. But it's, as you say, these large organizations, this doesn't happen overnight. But this pool, we see this, we feel it with our customer base.
So Wes McKinney's now an investor. Everyone loves Wes McKinney, creator of Pandas, kind of a saint in the data ecosystem. Recently came out with a paper a couple of weeks back talking about F3, this new data storage format. What do you believe is the promise of something like F3? You mentioned that you've got the founders of LanceDB, our angel investors in dltHub as well. They're promoting LanceDB. You've got Julian Dem, creator of Parquet, and I think Hannes and Mark and the DuckDB community are much more pro Parquet. What's your take on the pros and cons of these different formats? The reason I bring that up as well is that committing to a format is also kind of a tight, it's very painful to re-encode petabytes of data into different formats. And so the choice of data format can have a big impact on cost, on performance, and other things. So what are you observing in this world? But that may be taking sides amongst several of your angel investors and users.
I think the way I can narrate it is, I think as a dltHub position, I think we'll start talking about it in Q1 next year. But I think in general, we believe, again, in interoperability, modularity. We think a database will be all kinds of databases, and we think about how we can support them all. I think if I look truly at the ML things, at the Hugging Face, this, Hugging Face is called this data epicenter of data 2.0. When these people, until a year ago, 1.5 years ago, they just thought in data sets, which the modern data set.
Right.
It's what they don't understand.
It's a data set.
Then I think, I've read these 2 lengthy investor updates, and Julian was interacting with me about DuckDB, and you saw suddenly Hugging Face had parquet files. And
for so long, they were just CSV
sure, that's correct. And what I'm trying to say is, if you listen to these different communities, my mental model is this traditional infra crowd has a way of thinking about it, and they try to go ML, but they're not really reaching the other side. And the patterns and user behavior from the other side are actually not there. I don't think fundamentally that these worlds have met yet.
Yes.
That's what I observe, but it's something we've been thinking about, trying to have communications about for many years at dltHub. It's one of our North Stars to crack that.
What's your preference as a data engineer about format? Let me just ask the direct question: Parquet or CSV?
So I'm not a traditional data engineer. I'm a below average Python scripter and SQL person. I'm a good listener and product manager in this world, I think.
You're a pragmatist.
But so, people, in our dltHub, we allow people to download CSVs and parquet files and whatever, and when it goes to Excel, I think Excel is still the dominating BI tool of this world, even though great options like Rill data exists. So you need to build for the flexibility of end users. I think the needs of the, let's say, call it the Hugging Face crowd, have been not met. Like the Hugging Face data team is doing great, growing progress, but they still need, for example, to be even 10x their enterprise sales. They have still ways to go. I think Hugging Face would agree with that. So I think there's lot of work to done. We obviously fans of various vector databases. We're fans of Lens folks. We have ideas how to work with each other, but invent can we solve customer problems together?
Right. Well, that's a very that's an answer born of a lot of wisdom, of experience, right? As when I was a younger technologist, it was really often the answer was, let's pick the best technology. But when you've got real customers, you realize, look, while I would love them to have typed data sets, CSV is still the reality. Excel is still the reality.
So, we do education, right? With on our channel, you can see it. Like these kids who are in these notebooks, they trained on New York Taxi data sets, CSV into notebooks. That's the default of how this generation is trained.
Right.
They don't understand why databases exist.
Right.
So it's this tension exists not only like with us technologies,
sure,
but it's literally with these people who get hired into these organizations.
Right. What they've learned is CSV
That's correct.
and Excel.
That's correct.
And that's what their academic training would.
That's correct. They're not trained on Kimball. Like if you think about it, data engineers is like the super brainiac job, right? Like there's only a couple thousand who got added to the global job market. When I ask people, I think the guesstimate is there's less than 100,000 of these people globally, and they're like, so Python people explode, have millions, and so you see this tension between these data engineers and these now code-first users interacting with LLMs.
Right. We talked for a second earlier about your surprise that object storage was now the dominant destination for DLT pipelines, and that was not a bet you would have predicted, but the bet you are all in on, and now it makes a ton of sense given the origin story of DLT and dltHub, that you started thinking about agents from day zero. When you talk about making a bet on LLMs, expand that, paint a picture, maybe a more detailed picture for how you see people building with DLT, not even as the way the world is today, but what it will be in 3 or 5 or 7 years.
I would love to answer this question, but I'm probably not this person who's confident to tell you how this works. Like, I think like if you talk to people who work with LLMs, then they tell you that this year 5 times there were big upheavals. So for us, when we came out with these LLM scaffolds in July, there were 1,000 of these, and when we manage this project, like Adrian is managing this project, he can't tell me like there will be 5,000, 10,000 at the end of the year, because like they already changed twice very dramatically,
right.
And we already, if you count the historical version, we're version 100 plus. We will be at Christmas, we'll cross 10,000 scaffolds. I think we'll be in the 100,000s next year, and it will not only be REST APIs. So but it's not only like a quantitative move, but like the scaffolds become less and less human readable.
Right.
We have cycles. Things like MCP get invented and become a new thing to play with. Right. Like, we went from vibe coding to context engineering. Right. Like we have now background agents. So we closely try to understand all the AI code editors and build for them with them, and have like an end-to-end understanding of what our user base is doing, right? Like I tell you like one example, for example, in 2 months ago, we suddenly had like a lot of complaints from our users and we didn't know what happened. No product shipped.
Right.
But nothing changed. But what we start to understand it is that suddenly the LLMs can't like when our users are some of our users in YOLO mode, and they paste error message, the LLM suddenly had a tough time with our incremental loading. So we had to change our docs for incremental loading. That was like our analysis. It took us 3 days to figure out. So like figuring that out and managing this process is very different. Like we don't have product managers at dltHub. We have it's such a fast evolving thing that like the stakeholders running these things need to take these shots.
You can't
be
have
super
these
close.
hops, right.
It's not like in this grove where you can tell
Like even
people
sprints,
like you need people like we have like every 2-3 weeks. Okay, this works less. What do we do?
Right.
Right. So it's, and when GPT-5 drops, you see this like for a week, everyone close to GPT-5 is changing the engine in the flying plane.
So even if your software isn't changing, the world around your software is changing so fast that it can cause these dislocations that a traditional software engineering process isn't fast enough to address.
Yeah, like we have close partners like Continuum, which is like the open source competitor to Cursor. We have often engineers in their office, and they were part of our workshop yesterday, a small data SF. We try to talk to each other, figure out what users want, what is the initial, like, how do you prompt in data engineering. That's changed dramatically over the last couple months.
And looking at the nature of the prompts. I mean,
the nature of the prompts, what works, what doesn't.
Right.
Like I think everyone is trying to figure out, like, these user changes are so dramatic that that's why I have a hard time to predict
5 years, 3 years. It's like, it's hard to predict next month.
We have some long-term bets, which I'm uncomfortable talking about how the things will go.
Right.
But I think like maybe it's interesting for the people watching this to understand the nature, how building for this looks like right now.
Before we do our last call for Data Talks on the Rocks, which is the fast set of questions, I'll ask, if you were to give any advice to any up and coming data engineer today, what would it be to someone listening to this show and thinking about how they can break into this new era of kind of AI native data engineering?
So I think what we see is that like that I think there will be way more data engineers, and like we see real impact of AI on data engineering. I told you about the numbers of APIs which suddenly are accessible, and data sets, and you can do things end to end, and I think there will be many other value added, like we see much better data quality, risk management, new things. So I think the job itself is worth breaking in. So that's the first answer. Like, it's not like this doomerism some people may voice. It's a real thing we see. The second thing is like, you need to have a deep understanding of a modern data stack. It's not going to go away. Like these, just like this exists in this world, and it will stay. So you may be manipulating for AI code editor, but it's like the Python is just like this lingua franca where you still interact with these systems, and the LLMs will be only able to fix that to some degree.
And we need to call it the composable data stack.
Yeah.
Because the modern data stack is now kind of a...
Yeah. So for us, like, very practical, and this is maybe my moment of shilling DLT, is, go to our docs, try out the LM native workflow for DLT pipelines. You don't need to be data engineer. It can be a general software engineer, beginner. You can be a data scientist. I think within 1-2 hours, you'll have something useful running. That's what it is. Like suddenly new personas are doing something which traditional data infra people would tolerate as acceptable pipelines.
Congrats on the funding. As our last call, I'm gonna ask 5 quick questions. You get 60 seconds to answer them. And I'll start. This is Data Talks on the Rocks. In the past, we've often had a cocktail in hand. Matthaus, what is your favorite cocktail?
I had a rum-based old-fashioned last night.
Favorite city that you would want to spend a year in?
We love travel. I have 2 daughters, 5 and 8 years old. We were just in Portugal for 2 weeks, working remotely. I love big urban cities. New York is fantastic in America. Bay Area is a second home. I enjoy big cities much more than suburbia.
When you're working with tools, dark mode or light mode?
Dark mode.
As a programmer, is it Cursor? Is it Claude? Which LLM coding agent is your favorite today?
use 3-4 of them. Continue is a popular choice with us, but we also use Claude and other tools.
If there was one podcast that you think listeners should listen to besides Data Talks on the Rocks, what would it be?
I think a recent one, which I just watched a lot of the Karpathy stuff, I think, the last couple of weeks.
Oh, and Andres Karpathy.
Yeah.
Okay, right. He had an interview with Dorkesh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So whenever Karpathy says something, I find time to do podcasts.
Great. Well, it's such a pleasure, Matthaus, to have you here. Thanks for coming across the San Francisco city. We look forward to our next discussion, and congrats again on the $8 million fundraise.
Thanks for having me.